Amara sat quietly in her seat at Ridgewood High, her mind focused on the textbook in front of her. It was just another ordinary day, filled with the hum of voices and the shuffle of students moving through their routines. At least, it seemed that way. Amara, as always, kept to herself. Her thoughts centered on the future, on her goals, and on the quiet determination that drove her every move. Her classmates didn't know much about her other than the fact that she was a quiet, studious girl who tended to avoid drawing attention, and she liked it that way. The less they noticed her, the less trouble she would have. Unfortunately, her low profile didn't protect her from everyone. Jake and his group of friends, known for their brash behavior and tendency to pick on others, had long made her a target. Jake, in particular, had been relentless in his teasing. At first, it was subtle, small comments here and there, but as time passed, his remarks became more pointed, more cutting. He often mocked her for being too serious or too different. His friends snickered along, enjoying the sport of tearing others down. Today, it was different. Amara had been sitting in the back of the classroom, quietly working on her math problems when she heard Jake's voice. "Hey, Amara, you really think you're better than everyone else with that holier-than-thou attitude?" Jake sneered as he walked past her, his voice carrying across the room. Amara ignored him, focusing on the numbers in front of her. She had learned long ago that silence was the best response to someone like Jake, but today he wasn't going to let her be. "You really think you're special, huh? Just because you're the only one in this school who doesn't act like a fool." Jake's voice raised, and the entire class grew quiet, waiting for her response. Amara's hands gripped the edge of her desk. She could feel the familiar sting of anger bubbling inside her, but she kept her face neutral. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her upset. Jake wasn't done. "You're probably some kind of teacher's pet, huh? They probably give you special treatment because you think you're so smart. Well, guess what? Not everyone's impressed." Her heart raced as he continued to mock her. The humiliation stung, but it wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the worst. Still, the frustration was building up inside of her, her patience wearing thin. Suddenly, Jake walked over to her desk. "You know what? I think it's time someone taught you a lesson." His eyes gleamed with malicious intent as he grabbed a pair of scissors from the teacher's desk. He had been eyeing them all day. Without a moment's hesitation, he snatched a lock of her hair and sliced through it with a swift motion. The scissors clicked through the air, and a chunk of her hair fell to the floor. Amara froze, the shock of the attack leaving her speechless. The class went silent, and for a moment it felt like time had stopped. Jake and his friends laughed, their mocking laughter filling the room. "There, maybe now you'll know your place," Jake smirked, tossing the scissors back on the teacher's desk. Amara's face turned red, her pulse quickening. She had been pushed to her breaking point, and the humiliation felt too much to bear. Her hands clenched into fists, the anger and embarrassment fueling something deep inside her. She stood up slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was deathly silent, and everyone's eyes were on her. She could feel the weight of their gazes, but she didn't care. Jake's taunting smile faltered when he saw the intensity in her eyes. "What? You gonna cry about it, Amara?" He laughed, but Amara didn't cry. She didn't flinch. In that moment, she felt something within her snap, a quiet, powerful force rising. This wasn't just about the hair. This was about standing up for herself, for her dignity, for the countless times she had been treated like an outsider, a target. As the laughter died down, Amara stepped toward Jake, her expression unwavering. Without another word, she swiftly grabbed him by the arm, twisting it behind his back with a move so quick and precise it took everyone by surprise. The entire class gasped. Jake struggled, but Amara's grip was firm. She didn't let him go. His mocking tone was replaced by panic as he realized she was not the quiet, submissive girl he had picked on for so long. The power that had been building in her swelled to the surface, and as Jake tried to break free, Amara effortlessly took him down to the ground. She pinned him there, her body weight pressing him into the floor. The room was completely still, the only sound the heavy breathing of both Amara and Jake. The classroom was silent, the tension in the air thick as Amara stood over Jake, her eyes fierce. She had never imagined herself in a moment like this, standing up to the boy who had tormented her for so long. But there she was, and she wasn't backing down. Not anymore. Jake, now on the ground, his face red with embarrassment and pain, tried to wriggle free, but Amara's hold was unyielding. The room remained frozen, no one daring to speak. The power dynamic had shifted in that instant. The bully who had once wielded control over her life was now at her mercy. Amara's mind raced, but she didn't let her emotions overtake her. Her hands trembled with adrenaline, but she remained calm. She had learned martial arts from a young age, and the lessons weren't just about self-defense. They were about discipline, control, and knowing when to fight and when to walk away. Today she chose to fight, but not with rage. She fought with composure and strength. Jake's friends, who had been laughing just moments ago, were now dead silent, unsure of how to react. The sudden shift was too much for them to process. They had always seen Jake as the leader, the one who called the shots. But now he was the one on the ground, and it was clear that Amara had taken control. Amara looked down at Jake, her voice steady and firm. "You don't get to make people feel small anymore. Not me. Not anyone." Jake's face turned pale as he realized the consequences of his actions. He had underestimated her, had thought she was just another quiet girl, easy to push around. But now he saw the truth. Amara wasn't weak, and she wasn't afraid. She slowly released her grip on him, standing tall. Jake didn't move at first, still processing what had just happened. But when he finally pushed himself up, he couldn't look her in the eye. He was humiliated, and he knew he had no choice but to back down. As Amara turned to face the class, the silence was broken by the sound of applause. At first, it was hesitant, a few claps here and there, but soon the entire class was clapping, cheering her on. Amara stood there, feeling a wave of relief and pride wash over her. She had taken control of the situation, and in doing so, she had earned the respect of everyone around her. The days that followed were transformative. Jake and his friends, once the kings of ridicule, now walked with their heads down, avoiding Amara at all costs. They had learned a valuable lesson that day. Never underestimate the strength of someone you think you can push around. Amara's actions had rippled through the school, not just as a victory for herself, but as a message to everyone. Standing up for yourself is powerful. It might take one moment of courage to change everything, but once you do, you'll never be the same. After Amara's bold stand against Jake in the classroom, word spread like wildfire through the school. What had started as a personal victory for Amara quickly became the talk of Ridgewood High. The once seemingly untouchable bully, Jake, had been brought low in front of everyone, and Amara had been the one to do it. At first, Amara wasn't sure what to expect. She had acted on instinct, not knowing how the situation would unfold. But as she walked through the hallways the next day, she could feel the eyes of her classmates on her. Some students avoided her gaze altogether, unsure of how to react to what had happened. Others gave her nods of respect or shy smiles. Jake's friends, however, were different. They glared at her from the corner of the hallways, whispering behind her back, but they didn't dare approach her. The power dynamic had shifted completely. They were no longer the kings of the school. Amara had made sure of that. As for Jake, he had become a shell of his former self. He didn't show up to class for several days, and when he did, his once confident swagger was gone. His eyes were downcast, and he avoided any interaction with Amara. The once loud and arrogant boy had been reduced to someone who could barely make eye contact with his peers. But the real impact of Amara's actions began to reveal itself over the next few weeks. Teachers who had once ignored the subtle bullying taking place now took note. The students who had witnessed Jake's taunting and bullying began to step forward, admitting they had been silent accomplices to the mistreatment. Slowly, the culture of Ridgewood High began to shift. The principal, Mr. Thompson, called Amara to his office. She walked in, her heart racing, unsure of what to expect. Was she going to be punished for what had happened? Would she be reprimanded for standing up for herself? She had no idea, but when she sat down across from him, his demeanor was completely different from what she had anticipated. "Amara, I just wanted to speak with you about yesterday's incident," Mr. Thompson began, his voice calm and measured. "I've spoken to several of your teachers, and they've informed me that your actions have had a positive effect on the school. You've made it clear that bullying will no longer be tolerated here." Amara felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't in trouble. "Jake and his friends have been dealt with," Mr. Thompson continued. "They've been suspended for the rest of the week, and we're putting them through mandatory anti-bullying workshops. I want to thank you for stepping up and showing the kind of courage we want to foster in all our students." Amara was taken aback. She hadn't expected this kind of support. She had thought her actions might lead to more tension or even punishment, but instead she was being praised. She smiled, grateful for the recognition, but also surprised. In a way, her actions had sparked a wave of change she hadn't anticipated. As Amara left the principal's office, she felt a surge of pride. She had done more than just stand up for herself. She had become a catalyst for change, and she had the power to inspire others to do the same. The following days at Ridgewood High were different. Amara walked the hallways with her head held high, not out of arrogance, but with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've done something right. People were no longer afraid of her. They respected her. Her peers, who had once been content to watch from the sidelines, began to change their behavior. They started speaking up against the small, subtle forms of bullying that had once seemed so normal. It was as if Amara had opened their eyes to the fact that they didn't have to accept the status quo. They could challenge it. One day, during lunch, Amara sat with her group of friends in the cafeteria, a place that had once been fraught with tension. Now it was a place of camaraderie. As they chatted about their classes and the upcoming weekend, Amara noticed Jake sitting alone at a table in the far corner of the room. His friends had abandoned him, and the usual bravado he carried was nowhere to be found. He sat there, looking small, isolated, and regretful. A part of Amara wanted to go over to him, to offer some kind of apology for what had happened. But another part of her knew that this was his moment to reflect on the consequences of his actions. He needed to come to terms with what had happened, just as she had. The power of silence sometimes spoke louder than any words could. Later that week, Amara received a note in her locker. It was from Jake. He didn't sign it, but the message was clear. "I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was a start." For the first time, Jake had admitted that he had been wrong. He wasn't just apologizing for what he'd done to Amara. He was apologizing for the way he had treated everyone else, the way he had bullied and belittled people for no reason other than his own insecurities. Amara folded the note carefully and put it in her bag. She didn't need it to validate her actions. What she had done wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about standing up for what was right. And now she was beginning to see the fruits of her labor, change, growth, and, most importantly, respect. Jake might have started out as the bully, but in the end, Amara had become the one who had shown him, and everyone else, that true strength comes not from tearing others down, but from lifting them up. Amara stood at the edge of the school courtyard, looking out at the bustling students. The bell had just rung, and the usual chaos of the school day was starting to settle into its familiar rhythm. But today, something felt different. The atmosphere was charged with an unspoken energy, an energy of change, growth, and possibility. It had been a few weeks since the confrontation in the cafeteria, and everything had shifted. The school, once a place of subtle division and unspoken tensions, had begun to transform into a space where voices of change were being heard. What had started as one brave stand against bullying had sparked something much bigger, something that could ripple across the entire school, perhaps even the community. Amara had been quietly observing the shift. Her classmates, once indifferent to the subtle acts of bullying, now spoke up when they saw something wrong. The culture of silence had started to break. Students had begun to reach out to each other in support, offering help, encouragement, and solidarity. The change wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, but it was there, and Amara knew she had been the spark that started it. As she walked through the hallways, she couldn't help but notice the different way people looked at her. It wasn't the fearful glances that had once been directed her way. It was something else, something that she couldn't quite place. Respect, perhaps? Admiration, a mix of both. She wasn't just the girl who had stood up to a bully. She was the one who had taken a stand for what was right, and the people around her were beginning to realize the power of that. She had earned the respect of her peers, not through force or violence, but through her unwavering conviction and determination. She had stood up when others were too scared to, and she had done so with grace, poise, and strength. She had shown them that they didn't have to accept the status quo. They could change the narrative. They could make a difference. Amara felt a hand on her shoulder, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Jasmine, one of her close friends, with a wide smile on her face. "You did it, Amara," Jasmine said, her voice full of pride. "You really did it. Look around. The whole school has changed." Amara smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet pride. "We did it," she corrected her friend. "All of us. I didn't do this alone." Jasmine laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're too modest. You started this. You showed us what it means to stand up, not just for ourselves, but for everyone. You've made us all braver." Amara's smile widened, but she didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced around at the students, many of whom had been influenced by her actions. Some were talking to their friends, others were standing up for the quieter students who had been bullied. The change was real. It wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was a shift in the culture of Ridgewood High. As Amara and Jasmine continued walking to their next class, they passed Jake. He was sitting alone, his head down, but he wasn't looking at her with malice or resentment anymore. He was simply there, a quiet, solitary figure in the midst of a transformed school. Amara had expected to feel triumph, but instead, she felt something else, compassion. The change in him was just as profound as the change in the school. Jake had apologized, but more than that, he had begun to reflect on his actions. He was no longer the arrogant bully who had tormented Amara. He was someone who had learned a hard lesson about humility and the consequences of cruelty. Amara understood that it wasn't her job to force him to change. He had to come to that realization on his own. And now he was. The apology had been a first step, but the transformation was deeper than that. He wasn't the same person he had been before. Neither was Amara, neither was the school. As Amara sat in her classroom later that day, the realization hit her. She had done more than stand up for herself. She had given others the courage to do the same. She had created a ripple effect that would continue long after she graduated. The impact of her actions would resonate, and she had no doubt that it would inspire others to take a stand when they needed to. Amara didn't need recognition or accolades. She didn't need to be in the spotlight. The true victory was the change she had helped bring about, a change that would continue to shape the school long after she had left, and that, to her, was the greatest success of all. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Amara walked out of the school with her head held high. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she had the strength to face them. She had found her voice, and she had shown the world that standing up for what's right could change everything. And that was just the beginning.